You know, the church is supposed to be a safe place, right? A hospital for the soul. But what happens when that very place, the place you went to for healing, becomes the source of your deepest wounds? It's a tough conversation, but a really important one. Today, we're going to talk about healing from church trauma and how it might be possible to find a way back to trust after spiritual abuse. And this, right here, this is the feeling that gets to the heart of it. It's so much more than just being let down by people. It feels like a profound betrayal, and it can just shatter everything you thought you knew about yourself, about community, and maybe even about God. And I just need you to know right off the bat, that feeling is 100% valid.
So, we're going to get real about this pain. We're not going to sugarcoat it or throw out a bunch of easy, cliché answers. What we are going to do is try to map out a path forward, one that pulls from both psychology and from scripture, so we can actually acknowledge the wound and start the process of real healing.
You know, before you can heal something, you've got to understand it. You've got to be able to name it. So let's do that. Sometimes just seeing your experience defined can be incredibly powerful because it proves to you that you're not crazy, you're not alone, and that what you went through was real. So what are we actually talking about when we say spiritual abuse? Well, at its core, it's all about the misuse of power. It's when spiritual authority, which is supposed to build you up, to protect you, gets twisted and used to manipulate, to control, or to cause harm. It's a complete violation of a really sacred trust.
And here's why this stuff cuts so deep. It's often called complex trauma because it isn't usually a single one-time event. It's often a whole environment or a series of things that happen that attack the very foundation of who you are, your faith, how you see yourself, your whole worldview. And that's exactly why it feels so disorienting and is so incredibly hard to sort through.
Okay, I need you to really hear these three things. Number one, what she went through is real. Number two, it is not your fault. And number three, just like any other kind of deep trauma, healing often requires professional, trauma-informed help. You really don't have to, and you probably shouldn't, try to carry all of this by yourself.
So, what does this actually look like in day-to-day life? Well, you might notice things like hypervigilance, where you're just constantly on edge in any kind of spiritual or group setting. Or maybe you find it almost impossible to trust anyone in a position of authority. You might also find yourself doing what's called spiritual avoidance, steering clear of church, the Bible, even prayer, because it all just feels too painful. Just recognizing these patterns is a huge first step.
Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. The last place you want to look for answers right now is the Bible. And believe me, that is completely understandable. But what's surprising is that Scripture actually doesn't ignore this stuff. It doesn't pretend institutional failure doesn't happen. In fact, it gives us a really powerful way to respond to it.
The Bible actually models two really powerful and totally valid responses for us: lament and a call for justice. You had prophets like Jeremiah who openly wept and grieved over the corruption they saw in the religious system. Your sadness is righteous. And then you have Jesus, in places like Matthew 23, who just fiercely calls out and condemns abusive religious leaders. So your anger, your desire for justice, that is righteous too.
So here's the thing. The Bible itself gives you permission to be hurt, to be angry, and to bring all of that mess directly to God. The Psalms of Lament are an incredible tool for this. I mean, they are raw. They are unfiltered prayers that give you the words when you don't have them, letting you voice all that anger and betrayal without holding anything back.
Okay, so we've acknowledged the pain. We've seen that there's even a biblical framework for processing it. So what's next? What are the actual intentional steps we can take on this path to recovery? Let's dig into a more therapeutic approach.
We can break it down into 4 key steps. First, you've got to grieve what was lost. Second, you have to reestablish safety in your life. That is absolutely non-negotiable. Third, if and when you feel ready, you can start to reread Scripture but with fresh eyes. And fourth, like we said before, seeking professional, trauma-informed help can make all the difference.
Let's talk about grieving for a second. It's not just about feeling sad. It is so important to name what, specifically, was taken from you. You lost a community. You probably lost the version of faith you grew up with, the one that felt safe and simple. And for many, you lost a kind of innocence. Acknowledging these very specific losses is a huge part of being able to heal.
Now, if you get to a place where you can approach Scripture again, this one shift in mindset is a total game changer. The goal is to separate God from the people who hurt you, to focus on the character of God as revealed in Scripture, not the character of his broken followers.
What you experienced was the result of flawed, sometimes malicious people, not the heart of God.
And that leads us to this incredibly important truth. The people who hurt you, the people who caused all this trauma, they do not get the final say. They do not get to define your fate or your spiritual identity.
No, your faith can be redefined. It can be rebuilt. It can ultimately be defined not by the wound, but by the one who brings healing to that wound. The focus shifts away from the brokenness of people and onto the healing, restorative character of God.
So I want to leave you with this question to chew on. What if this isn't the end of your faith story? What if this incredibly painful chapter is actually the start of discovering a faith that's stronger, more real, and more deeply rooted in the God who heals instead of the people who hurt?